Come, let us grow in the grace and knowledge of Him who saves us by His blood. Let us put down roots to deep water. Let us drink from the fountain of life. And we shall be like trees planted by the waters, planted by rivers wide and deep. Trees green and fruitful, bearing fruit of love in the vineyard of the King. Come, let us grow in the grace and knowledge of God's Spirit by which we're sealed, studying the riches of His word. Let us eat of the bread that He gives, and we shall be like trees planted by the waters, planted by rivers wide and deep. Trees green and fruitful, bearing fruit of love in the vineyard of the King. Come, let us grow in the grace and knowledge of He who calls us by His Son. Let us gather now at His table. Let us feast on the richest of food. And we shall be like trees planted by the waters, planted by rivers wide and deep. Trees green and fruitful, bearing fruit of love in the vineyard of the King. Good morning. Let's satisfy one another this morning, shall we? Sitting here trying to do my tagging again. And remember who all we normally tag. How you doing this morning, Miss Sister Maureen? Good morning, Chabai. Chabai. Oh, there's plenty of problems. Always problems, amen. This world is full of problems. But there's also solutions. One and the first and foremost is to have God in your life, which I'm thankful I do. Everything else falls into place. Like I said, I'm just trying to do tagging over on Facebook for the video, and that takes some doing. Oh yeah, that's what That's what every person does, fights them. Some people lose, some people win. I usually say that's where, if people have problems, come to me, because that's why God gave me broad shoulders. But there are times when even we broad shouldered people have troubles that we need to go to other people for. Which is usually why I rely on my daughter to do the do the tagging, because she just whips it out knocks it out real quick. It's like, man, come on. But she's unavailable today, so it's like, okay, great. Levi, you got to do it yourself. It's like, okay, no, there's a normal list, but I don't normally do it on my phone. She has a tablet she does it on, and I don't have that either right now. So I'm just up a creek without a paddle in this case. I think I'm getting got most of the ones that we normally tag down. I think I got them. I'll probably think of about half a dozen more by the time I get done. By the time, within a few seconds of getting this all done. So. Sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Friends despise, forsake me. Do I lose something, anything, even after a fight? There's a lot of things that can be said about what we lose, what we gain when we fight, regardless of what the fight is, whether we're talking about a physical, emotional, or metaphorical. Um, as in physical, emotional, or spiritual. Because when we fight physically, we do lose. Even if we win, we lose things, because we can lose friends, we can lose pieces of ourselves, as in literal physical pieces of ourselves. We can also lose a part of our psyche, part of our own self-esteem, whether it's, especially if we end up fighting for something that is not, or is turns out to be deemed non-valid. We find out that what we were fighting for was not actually right. We lose face, standing, prestige. Emotionally, when we fight, regardless of whether it's physical, spiritual, emotional, there's damage done. Yet, or should I say, I guess I should continue in that vein. Emotionally, we definitely lose a piece of ourselves, because as we fight, we have to deaden ourselves. We have to ignore, if you will, some of the emotions that we're feeling, set it aside. And that may include, maybe even part of the reason that we lose friends. Fighting is not always, is rarely ever a one-sided battle. Even when I'm trying to say that no battle, no participant is ever fighting a one-sided battle, because every battle has multi-facets. Every spiritual battle is reflected within the physical realm. It's reflected in the emotional realm. And the same holds true with our emotional battles, i.e. our mental battles, and our physical battles. They're all reflected elsewhere. You may think that they're only reflected, they're only in the one sphere, but they're not. Perhaps you gain joy out of your fights, and to some degree it can be a joy to test our strength in the physical sense, and to see who's stronger, who wins. But there's always a price to pay. Always. Even in the spiritual, there's always a price to pay. And you don't want to be negative. You don't want to be cynical and say, well, Kelly, what's the price? But your body pays a price when you fight in the physical sense. If you're out there boxing, for example, you're putting your body through a very rigorous ordeal. And your body's going to pay the price. It may not be today. It may be tomorrow. It may be 3 years down the road. It may be, 50 years down the road. Your body will pay. You put your emotions through an ordeal. As you hyper focus upon your contest, whatever, your physical contest, well, your emotional state goes through an ordeal. especially as you're dealing with all the adrenaline and the other stimulants that are going through your body, um, hyper focused upon that ordeal. And your emotions will pay. It's a little more. It's a little more quick of a payment than, say, your body, which will take a toll. Could take a toll for 50 years down the road, but it will pay, and you might find yourself, you know, back in your room crying for really what seems to be no unexplained, for no reason. But in reality, it's because you are coming down off an emotional high, or you're paying the price. Good morning, Gogo, and good morning, Sister T. So every fight has a payment, and in your spiritual battles, you have a cost. Now, one might say that there are, in a lot of ways, more positive gains, especially when you're dealing with your spiritual battles. You can have more positive gains, but not always. As we fight our spiritual battles, more often than not, we are broken before we're ever rebuilt. We have to hit rock bottom before we can ever reach higher. It's essentially like, I like to garden. I'm a gardener at heart, and I was raised a farmer. I'm a farmer, and I'll always be one. I'm a gardener because I can't own a farm yet. Not a big one, but that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and go with that tag right there. It's smaller, but anyway. That being said, you plant a seed, it's broken, it dies before it truly lives. The seed itself dies, it breaks open, but it dies to give birth to that plant. You and I, in a spiritual sense, die in order to give birth to something greater each and every time. And we have to put to death certain things, spiritually speaking, in order for us to rise, to gain new heights. And that's why, like in Romans chapter 6, it talks about that new birth that is acquired through baptism. When you enter into the watery grave, you are planted, and you then rise to walk in newness of life. Well, in our spiritual battles, especially in that new life, Jesus had said, you crucify, you take your cross daily and follow him. So you crucify yourself, your ego, your unhealthy desires daily, because they're always there. So yeah, you have to lose in order to win. And it's going to be a constant struggle. Life is a constant struggle. You go out and you look at anything around us, any of the plants, for example, it's a constant struggle. It's a struggle between the sun and the plant. It's a struggle between the wind and the plant. It's a struggle between the rain and the plant, between the animals and the plant. It's a constant daily struggle. And so our life is a struggle as well. If we didn't have that struggle, we would never grow. If we didn't lose, we would never win. We would never truly value winning. You know, as I, again, because every one of us, especially once you've gotten to, uh, well, since how I've only reached this age, since you've gotten to my age, you've dealt with loss of life, of loved ones, frequently, or enough times anyway. If you haven't dealt with any loss of life, you don't value life at all. You don't truly value what you have. In Genesis chapter 3, we'll get there. Genesis chapter 2, let's start there, not in verse 9 and following. Out of the ground Jehovah God made Jehovah God to grow every tree that was pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then in verse 16 or 15 and 16, Jehovah God took the man, put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And Jehovah God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Now, Adam was born, or was created, a fully living, breathing, functioning man. He wasn't created a baby that had to take time to grow. And God made him an adult. And he says in verse 18, or he gives him a command. He gives him a home, and he gives him a command, verses 15 through 17. The home he puts is the Garden of Eden. He gives him a purpose in verse 15, to dress and to keep it. In other words, to tend to the garden. And he gives him sustenance. It gives him the garden for food. Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. There you go. There's your food. So he gives him shelter, food, and a purpose. But he says he also gives him a restriction. You may not eat of this one tree and this one tree here. It's kind of like mom telling you, do not touch that stove. It's hot. You can touch everything else in the kitchen, but do not touch that stove. It's hot. And of course, what do? Just saying. You touched that stove, didn't you? Jehovah God said, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a help suitable for him. Out of the ground, God formed every beast of the field,
every bird of the heavens, and brought them unto man to see what he would call them. Adam had all the requisite knowledge needed to be able to name every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens. Yeah, you did, didn't you, Sister T? We all had to touch it at least once to understand what hot was, didn't we? You ain't no different than Adam. You ain't no different than Eve. Just saying. We had to touch it. But Adam had all the knowledge he needed to name these things. Whatever man called every living creature, that was its name thereof. It wasn't, hey, you're Bob, you're Tom, you're Jenny, you're. No. But whatever he called those living creatures, that's the name thereof. He gave names to all the cattle, to the birds of the heavens, to every beast of the field. But for man there was not found a helper suitable for him. That's right, Sister T. You don't need to say anything, but you've been tempted to do it. So herein is the thing. Man had all the knowledge he needed. He was not a baby. He was a functioning adult male. One thing he didn't have was the knowledge of good and evil. The knowledge to discern between right and wrong. It doesn't matter what that tree was. You know, people say, "Well, we don't know it was an apple tree. It could have been, it could have been a mango tree. It could have been who cares? No one knows. No one cares. The Bible doesn't say what it was, except that it was its fruit brought the knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't that it imparted some specific virtue per se. But notice what happened the moment that they partook of it. Verse 7, the eyes of them both were opened and they knew that they were naked. They discerned right and wrong. They also knew that they had sinned. They knew that they had done what God had told them not to do. Because as soon as they heard the voice of the Lord, of Jehovah God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, they went and hid themselves. So yes, there was some sort of imparted knowledge, virtue, or loss thereof. But it still doesn't matter what that fruit was, because in eating of it, they recognized they had done evil. They lost their naivety. They lost their innocence. They died spiritually. It wasn't intended to be, Sister T. So I have to go and figure in and change everything. Give me a moment. Stop that. Don't go on like that, Sister T. Yes, I absolutely am. So they lost their naivete. They lost their innocence. They lost a battle. God gave them a position to hold, and they lost. You and I, well, and in that loss, they were broken totally. Yet God gave them a, you'll have to mention that at reading time, Sister T. God gave that, or gave them an opportunity, a hope of rebuilding. Did they die in their lost state? We're not told. We aren't. However, this one thing we do know. Let me show you something. God didn't leave them barren, hopeless. First off, God gave them a prophecy. In his cursing of the serpent, he gave them a prophecy. The prophecy of the destruction of the serpent. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. He shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And he gave each and every one of them a punishment befitting the crime. To the woman, He multiplied her sorrow and pain, or rather her pain and her childbirth. But he also put her, instead of, how do I put this? You often wonder if if the roles had been reversed, what would have happened? We're going to talk. Not going to even go into that, because that's all pure subjection. What's the word I'm looking for? Conjecture. But he put her desires upon her husband. And he's going to lead. He's going to lead. To Adam, he's like, because you listened to her instead of me, even though you had all of this given to you, you now are going to have to work 100 times harder. And you're going to have to work for your food. You're going to have to work for it. I had given you everything, and you turned your nose up at it. There was a cost for losing that battle. There was a cost for that battle, period. Every child that Eve had after that, she thought, well, this is the fulfillment of that prophecy. I've gotten a man with the help of Jehovah. Here comes Abel. Abel meaning well, that's real informative. Son of Abel, or son of Adam. Does not mean son of Adam. Come on, people. Breath. Thank you. It means breath. So you have Cain, literally meaning I've gotten begotten of the Lord, or from the Lord. And then you have breath. And then you have Seth. But know this as well. They weren't left destitute of God's favor. Because they offered sacrifices. They worshiped God. And Abel was a righteous man. There was a cost. They were broken. And yet, Adam still taught his children to worship God. Abel worshiped God and was righteous. Cain worshiped God, but he did so and threw it all away. Then there was Seth. You and I have a cost spiritually, physically, emotionally. We may lose family members because we stand for God. They will not want to be around us anymore. And if that's the case, which is more important, God or family? You have to ask that question, and you have to decide that for yourself. There is a cost. What does Jesus say? Everyone who shall confess me before men, him will I also confess before my Father who is in heaven. Matthew 10:32. Great. I'm willing. I believe that Jesus is the Christ, Son of God. Who's with me? Whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father who's in heaven. I'll never deny my Lord. Okay. Well, Jesus says this also. He says, think not that I'm come to send peace on the earth. But wait a minute. Jesus, you're the King of peace. What do you mean you didn't come to send peace on the earth? I thought you were the King of peace. I thought you were bringing peace. Isn't your way the way of peace? Oh, yeah, it is. But it's peace between God and man. There can be peace between men and goodwill between men. Those who follow the way of peace. But there's always going to be wars and rumors of war because not everybody follows the way. He didn't come to send peace on earth. He came not to send peace, but a sword. For I came to set man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. That's why we have so many mother-in-law jokes. And a man's foes should be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Not that you have to hate your father and mother, but if you let them interfere with your walk for Christ, you love them more than Christ. If you let them prevent you from doing what Christ has said, whether it be not gossiping, not slandering, or whether it be not coveting, if you let them prevent you from not coveting, oh, that one touches, doesn't it? Or perhaps you let them prevent you from attending services, worship of God. You love them more than you love God. You love them more than you love Christ. He that loveth father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loves son and daughter more than me is not worthy of me. If you'd rather go to and be around your family than around the family of God, there's an issue. If you'd rather go and be around your family and they're drinking and they're carousing, they're dancing, they're partying, they're screaming and hollering and cussing, instead of being at peace and quiet and spending time studying and meditating upon God. Oh, but I can't influence them. I can't teach them the Word of God if I'm not around them. Honey, you can take them aside and you can teach them individually. You don't have to party with them. But ask yourself this: are you really influencing them? Are you really doing it to influence them? What is your motivation? If you love father, mother, sister, daughter, son or daughter, sister, brother more than God, more than Christ, you're not worthy of Christ. He that doth not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy than me. And sometimes that means we have to lose family. We have to put aside our feelings of family, not our love for them. We'll always love them. But sometimes that means not being around them when they're partying and drinking, cussing, and carousing. Because you know that what they're doing is sinful. And you have a responsibility to not be around it. Abhor the appearance of life, of evil. Hmm. Just so spiritual battles oftentimes result in loss. They will break you. When you pray to God saying, Lord, give me wisdom, the first thing that you're going to have to do is admit you don't know what you think you know. You're going to have to recognize that God's wisdom is above yours. others. But you're going to end up going through some situation wherein your knowledge is going to be tested. Whatever knowledge it is. If you pray for a blanket prayer of Lord, give me wisdom, you're going to go through a situation that requires wisdom. And you will understand, you will be broken and develop wisdom, or you'll be broken and still be a fool. You only have two options as you go through that situation. You pray for comfort. He'll give you comfort. Especially in your times of grief. But understand that it's at a cost of grief. It's at a cost of recognizing how low you are. You want guidance? You got to recognize how lost you are. You want protection? Recognize how vulnerable you are. You want rain? Recognize how dry. God doesn't just simply smack you with a wisdom stick. When you fight your battles, as I said before, all throughout this, you're going to be broken. It is a truth of the exercise world, of the medical world, that as you exercise, you actually tear your muscle in order to increase your muscle. The same holds true with your fights, your battles. Spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. Something has to be torn, it has to be broken in order for it to be repaired and built back stronger. Kind of like the bionic man. Just like that plant we talked about at the beginning. Something has to die in order for it to live. Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 6, for I am already being offered, and the time of my departure is come. And I can't tell you how hard it is for me to read the next few verses. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give to me at that day, and not to me only, but also to all them that have loved his appearing. As many of you know, my mother is fighting her final battle. And I was just down there yesterday after work, visiting with her. And she's losing the physical side of the battle. She's ready and has been since the news broke. Meanwhile, those of us who have to remain are being broken. But we recognize the fact that she's getting ready to move on to something stronger, something better. Because she has fought a good fight. And her course here is nearly run. She has kept her faith. And demonstrated to each and every one of us that faith over the years. And we'll leave her in the hands of a righteous God, a righteous judge. We know that when she heads home, she ain't lost. And we take comfort in that. We don't cry because mom will be passing on. We cry because we will no longer have her with us here. And that emptiness that each and every one of us feels. Battles fought leave scars because you have lost something, yet gained far more. If you have not gained something from your battle, then you did not win the battle. You lost. Thank you, Sister T. But if you can look back at any of your battles that you have fought, physical, emotional, or spiritual, mental, And you cannot put a value, you cannot see a gain, then you didn't win, you lost. And perhaps it's time to revisit that battle, to consider what it is that you should have learned, because every battle should be a learning experience. Every loss should be a learning experience, because the moment you learn something from it, it becomes a win. And I know that sounds like such an oxymoron, and it sounds very cliche, but you may have lost a battle in one sense, but you can win it in another. I may win a battle physically, but lose it mentally. I may win a battle physically, but lose it spiritually. I may win a battle emotionally, but lose it physically or spiritually. And then there's the one, my personal favorite, I may win it spiritually, but lose it physically. Because I'd rather win a spiritual battle and lose it physically than to win a physical battle and lose it spiritually. We are tested and tried at every turn. Not because God doesn't believe that we can do it. And here's the difference. Here's the thing. When we read 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, there hath no temptation taken you but such as man can bear, but God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation make a way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. God knows how much you are able to bear. He doesn't believe, doesn't have to. He knows. He built you. He built me. He knows what you can go through. You and I believe based upon evidence, upon things around us. But God knows. He knows our limits. He knows our strengths. He knows our weaknesses. He says, this is as far as you can go. Just like with Job. You can take all he has, but don't touch him. You can touch him, but don't take his life. He sets the boundaries, and nothing crosses it. Hello, Sister Carol. So we may take comfort from that. We can take strength from that. We can win a battle and lose it, win in one form and lose it in another, or we can lose a battle in one form and win it in another. Oops, wrong way. We need to also recognize verse 12. Let him that thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. Paul draws that conclusion after giving us multiple examples from the wanderings of the Israelites. And he states how those things happened to them for our example. They were written down for our admonition. So that we can read all that happened to them and be admonished by their example, so that we don't get too arrogant. If it happened to the children of Israel, to the children of God, then it can happen to us. Yet understand this one principle, that there's no temptation that comes upon you, but such as man can bear. He uses the word temptation, not trial, temptation. I wonder. The word is putting to the proof experience of evil, adversity. There's no adversity that comes upon you. Is it the 3986? Is it the same thing as he uses in chapter 3? Oh. Let's see here. Quite. Trying with my faith, being more precious than gold. No, that's 1383. So it's not. Okay. But it is the same one that James uses. $39.86. But temptation is a way of trying. Huh. Cool. All right. So God knows. He knows just exactly how much you can bear and will not let it go beyond what you can bear. Yes, we bring such trials upon ourselves through our own stupidity, James chapter 1. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God tempted, um, God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempteth no man. Temptation comes from within. He's drawn away by his own lust and enticed. Lust, when it hath conceived, beareth sin, and sin, when it is full grown, bringeth forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Yet God still will not allow that temptation beyond a certain amount, beyond what you're able to bear, beyond what you can win. He's not going to let you fight a stronger opponent than what you can beat. Take heart, take strength, take courage from that fact. We are our own worst enemy. But fightings, we win, we lose every battle. There are pieces of us that are broken and reshaped. Kind of like, a person who goes into fights, boxing and stuff. You can tell because their nose has been mashed and their ears have been mashed, and other parts of them have suffered because for example, their hands, knuckles, because they've been broken physically. Mother's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and on the Sunday following her birthday, there was a very terrible accident just on the road that is just south of one of my stops on my route. In fact, the road itself where the accident occurred is on my route. I just don't have anybody that far south. It involved 5 teenagers, most of which were 17. It happened just prior to midnight. And it resulted in the loss of one 17-year-old girl. Because people that should have known better didn't do better. And now at least one 17-year-old will spend the rest of her life paying for it emotionally. So in essence, two bright lights were snuffed out that day. One entirely, physically, the other one emotionally. My mind still struggles to come to grips, having learned of it. Still kind of struggles to come to grips with why certain mistakes were made by adults that knew better. And I doubt I'll know. Doubt I'll ever know. The question you have to answer becomes then, what are you going to do with your battles? God gave us everything we need, just like he did with Adam. Adam was made a fully functioning adult and given the pertinent information he needed to make the decisions that he was required to make. You have been given everything you need, all the tools. You've been given your armor, you've been given your sword, you've been given your shield. You've been given the knowledge in book form. There were multiple 17-year-olds, Sister T. One 17-year-old was driving, one 17-year-old died. The driver is the one that is emotionally paying the price. But you've been given the knowledge that you need for a life in godliness. Second Peter chapter 2, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. Peter says, God, that his divine power hath granted unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness through the knowledge of him that called us by his glory, by his own glory and virtue. We've been given the knowledge of a life and a godly life. We've been given the armor. We've been given the sword. We've been given the shield. We've been given a battle to fight. Paul fought his. He ran his race. He fought his battles hard. Romans chapter 7. And with just as much fervor, he ran his race, going where the good Lord told him to go, doing what the good Lord told him to do. How about you? Our Father God in heaven, we thank you for this day of life, for all the opportunities that it presents to us. We thank you, Father, for giving us opportunities of growth through the battles that we face this day. We thank you for the choices that we have to make. choices of whether to speak or not to speak, choices of doing. Father, we thank you for the opportunities to learn wisdom, to learn discretion and knowledge, to develop joy and peace, compassion, love, opportunities to spend time with you, family of Christ, opportunities to serve the communities around us as your children, that they may see you through what we do and what we say. We thank you for the opportunity to use the knowledge that you have blessed us with to further your kingdom and your glory. May we indeed have your blessing and use it in such manner as pleases you. May our sacrifice this day find favor in your sight. We do ask, Father, that you would continue to bless us with wisdom and guidance, protection, comfort, strength, and whatever else that we need. We ask this by your Son's authority. Amen. It was a very emotional, draining day for me yesterday. Being with Mother was a blessing, and I'm very thankful for every moment that I get with Mom. But as I'm sure you all have experienced, it was also draining to see her in such a state. And I do appreciate your prayers on behalf of her as well as on behalf of our entire family. As you go forth today, make sure you fight the good fight. Stay faithful and true to that fight each and every day that God has blessed you upon this earth. Know that you will win some battles and you will lose some battles. But so long as you learn from your battles, no battle is ever truly lost. To that end, no matter what you do, win or lose, add to your faith devotion. God bless you in your walk with Him. I love you all. Have a blessed day.